السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. وهو من أغمض أنواع علوم الحديث وأدقها، ولا يقوم به إلا من رزقه الله تعالى فهما ثاقبا وحفظا واسعا ومعرفة تامة بمراتب الرواه وملكة قوية بالأسانيد والمتون، ولهذا لم يتكلم فيه إلا القليل من أهل هذا الشأن كعلي بن المديني وأحمد بن حنبل والبخاري ويعقوب بن أبي شيبة وأبي حاتم وبزرعة والدارقطني. وقد تقصر عبارة المعلل عن إقامة الحجة على دعواه كالصيرفي في نقد الدينار والدرهم. So we concluded the last lesson explaining the definition of معلل narrations وخبر ظاهر والسلامة اطلع فيه على قادح. So the main point to note is that apparently when you're looking at it from the outside, the narration seems fine. And an average muhaddith would even grade it as authentic. But so the defect is hidden. So let us just maybe go through one example to see how on the surface everything seems fine, but in reality it was graded as weak. So Mullah Liqari presents the same example which Ibn Salah rahmallah gave. Ma rawahu thiqat, he says that example of where thiqa rawis narrate and make mistakes is Ya'la ibn Ubayd an Sufyan al-Thawri an Amr ibn Dinar an Ibn Umar an Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam. So with regards to this, he says فَهَذَا إِسْنَادٌ مُتَّصِلٌ بِنَقْلِ الْعَدْلِ عَنِ الْعَدْلِ. It's ittisal, it's a thiqa rawi narrating from a thiqa rawi. But so if an average muhaddith has to look at it, he would grade it as authentic. But the reality is وَهُوَ مُعَلَّلٌ غَيْرُ صَحِيح. And the reason why it is mu'allal is that Ya'la ibn Ubayd made a mistake. Instead of Amr bin Dinar, he supposed to say Abdullah ibn Dinar. So, but wakilahuma thiqah. So that's just an example to show you that how from the outward it will look like it is an authentic narration. So based on that, Ibn Hajar rahmallah says, وَهُوَ مِنْ أَغْمَضِ أَنْوَاعِ عُلُومِ الْحَدِيثِ وَأَدَقِّهَا. This here is the most intricate, the most difficult of all the different sciences of ulum al-hadith. And because it is the most difficult, it makes it the greatest. Alama Khatib said, "Inna ma'rifat al-ilali ajallu anwa'i ilm al-hadith." It is the greatest. Likewise, Ibn Salah rahmallah i'lam anna ma'rifat al-ilal al-hadith min ajalli ulum al-hadith wa adaqqiha wa ashrafiha. Because it is so difficult, not everyone can detect the defect, leave alone comment on it. ولا يقوم به إلا من رزقه الله تعالى فهما ثاقبا وحفظا واسعا ومعرفة تامة بمراتب الرواة وملكة قوية بالأسانيد والمتون. Only those can involve themselves in this who have extraordinary intelligence and deep understanding. فهما ثاقبا وحفظا واسعا, they have a sharp memory and alert mind. ومعرفة تامة, profound insight into all the different grades and the ranks and the levels of the narrators. So basically they have like encyclopedic knowledge, but also وملكة قوية بالأسانيد والمتون. So they need to have a strong grasp on both the text also and the sanad. So not just the sanad, also the text, the matan of the hadith. An average muhaddith, and even one who is slightly better than average, even a good muhaddith, he will not be able to just find the defect. And therefore he would assume that the narration is authentic. And besides all this, having all of these qualities, having such, like literally, you can say a person needs to be a genius. A person has to be an extra genius person. But besides all of that, he also needs to enjoy divine assistance. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala guides him, and only then he can comment. So since there are such stringent requirements, there were very few who could contribute to this field. ولهذا لم يتكلم فيه إلا القليل من أهل هذا الشأن. There were very few who could contribute. And Alama ibn Rajab al-Hanbali, he quotes Ibn Manda is saying that إنما خص الله بمعرفة هذه الأخبار نفرا يسيرا من كثير ممن يدعي علم الحديث، فأما سائر الناس ممن يدعي كثرة كتابة الحديث أو متفقه في علم الشافعي وأبي حنيفة أو متبع لكلام الحارث المحاسب والجنيد وذنون وأهل الخواطر، فليس لهم أن يتكلموا في شيء من علم الحديث. So you can see that only very few who can provide input. And many scholars did not see themselves but to offer any comments on this. لقلة من اجتمعت فيه الصفات المذكورة من أهل هذا الشأن. There were very few who even qualified to do this, because it was only the experts who could detect the flaw, and they were the ones who were able to do so, and they would do it by gathering the different chains in. In this way, they were unable. In this way, they would manage to unveil the defect. And because it was only this handful of scholars who could do this, so those who qualified and were worthy of doing it, they would then prefer to rather gather different chains so that they can detect the defect, rather than increasing in the amount of narrations that they have. So the famous statement of Abdurrahman bin Mahdi, لأن أعرف علة حديث هو عندي أحب إلي من أن أكتب 20 حديثا. For me, to learn of the defect of just one narration which I have is better than for me to go and gather 20 different narrations. So the experts, they would rather look at quality instead of a quantity. Because if they did not explain that there is a defect, these who are the cream of the crop, then the general muhaddithun would regard that narration as authentic. Now Ibn Hajar rahmallah presents a list of those who are proficient in the science. He says كعلي بن المديني وأحمد بن حنبل والبخاري ويعقوب بن أبي شيبة ويعقوب بن شيبة وأبي حاتم وأبي زرعة والدارقطني. He took the names here of these 7 scholars. So even in these glorious days when there was such an abundance of muhaddithun, it was just this handful of scholars who could comment. So this list which Ibn Hajar rahmallah gives here, it is not a comprehensive or exhaustive or encompassing list. It is just the names of a few main scholars. But the thing which I want to highlight here is that look at the era of these scholars. He starts with Ali bin Madini. You know, Ali bin Madini, he was born in the year 161 and he passed away in the year 234. So you can already see it's already midway past the 2nd century. So because he was, and obviously he was now starting to speak not when as a child, after he was becoming an expert. So it's the point which I want to make is that this became a full-fledged science in only the 3rd century. So Ali bin Madini 161 234. Then Ahmad bin Hanbal 164 and he passed away in 241. He mentions Imam Bukhari's name first and then Yaqub ibn Shayba, but Yaqub bin Shayba was born first. He was 12 years older than Imam Bukhari. He was born in 182 and he passed away after Imam Bukhari in 262. Then Imam Bukhari rahimahullah in 194 and he passed away in 256. So you can see the era, it's all of them are going into the 3rd century. Likewise, Abu Hatim al-Razi, 1 year he was born after Imam Bukhari. So he was born in 195 and he passed away in 277. Abu Zur'ah was born in 210. You know all the different ikhtilaf on his date of birth. Some said that he was born in the year 200, etc. But he passed away in the year 264. And Ibn Abi Hatim, and then Imam Darqutni, rahimahullah, he was born even in the next century. So now it's already going to 306 and he passed away in the year 385. So from here, you can recognize now how late these scholars were. And this already now gives you an idea that ilal actually became a science which got prominence in the 3rd century. And so from here, you can see that this is why you always need to keep dates in your mind, because it's not just that you read this and you read these few names here. It can already give you so much insight. You can already understand. Now, couple this with the fact which we mentioned in the last lesson, that most of the ilal actually took place in the sanad. So now you can understand how come earlier scholars didn't worry so much about ilal, because there's no sanad at that time. The initial stage is it was just the Sahabi directly from the Prophet ﷺ, or the sanad was extremely short. So there was no hidden defects. If there was a defect, it was very apparent. So here when it's the reason why you have all these scholars who came so late is because now when the sanad, when asanid became longer, then it started to become more difficult. So if you have to go back in this year, it actually started in the time of Sahaba. You know, there were so many times when one Sahabi would take out the mistake of another Sahabi. You know, those occasions when Aisha radiallahu anha would inform others of the mistakes of Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu. So Abu Huraira radiallahu anhu was obviously reliable, and others were unable to detect the error or the mistake. So this is precisely the definition of mu'allal. هو خبر طاهر والسلام اطلع فيه على قادح. So one Sahabi taking out the mistake of another. So this is where it all started, from the science of ilal. But since these were not very frequent, you can ignore the whole era of the Sahaba. Likewise, it also wasn't very common in the time of the Tabi'een. The first scholar to outline hidden errors. So remember, we're talking about here hidden, because towards the end of the lesson, you will see that it also refers to apparent. But for now, based on the section, we are referring to hidden mistakes. So the first hidden defects. The first scholar to outline the hidden defects was Muhammad bin Sirin, 110 Hijri. Then his student Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani was born in 66 and passed away in 131. He followed in the footsteps of Muhammad bin Sirin. Then some assume that Ibn Uyayna also wrote a book, but actually what happened is Ali bin Madini, rahmallah, he wrote a book, Ilalu Ḥadīth ibn Uyayna. This is the name of the book, Ilalu Ḥadīth ibn Uyayna. So some people began to understand that it means Ilalul Hadithi libn Uyayna, and that is how maybe in some sources you will find them putting the name of Ibn Uyayna here, but it's not Ibn Uyayna. So it's Muhammad bin Sirin, then Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani, in turn his student. So the student of Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani, Shu'bah, was born in the year 85 and passed away in 160 Hijri. He began to outline hidden errors more frequently. Ibn Rajab Hanbali, he said that وهو أول من وسع الكلام في الجرح والتعديل واتصال الأسانيد وانقطاعها ونقب عن دقائق علم العلل. So he's saying that, and then after he says وأئمة هذا الشأن بعده تبع له في هذا العلم. The scholars who came after, they had to follow Shu'bah in the Siyam. And then he quotes the statement, so this is all in Sharh Ilal al-Tirmidhi on page 163. He quotes from Salih bin Muhammad, أول من تكلم في الرجال. So he's saying that the very first was Shu'bah, but obviously it was the teacher and the grand teacher of Shu'bah, Muhammad bin Sirin, because you have his verdicts, and then Ayyub al-Sakhtiyani. So he was the third, but because he began to do it more frequently. So Salih bin Muhammad says the first was Shu'bah, ثم تبعه يحيى بن سعيد القطان ثم تبعه أحمد بن حنبل ويحيى بن معين. So Yahya ibn Sa'id al-Qattan, some have even attributed to him, so he lived between 120 and 198 Hijri. Like I say, you have to know all of this. So some attributed to him and said that he wrote a book on Ilal. However, that is incorrect. He did not write a book. Then you could also add Abdurrahman bin Mahdi. Yeah, his contributions cannot be overlooked. So it's 135 to, again, same year he passed away, 198. And both of these scholars, always remember, Yahya bin Sa'id and Abdurrahman bin Mahdi, they passed away in the same year, anyway, from the same city. Both of them were Basris. There was also a Shi'i scholar who tried to contribute, Hassan bin Mahbub bin Wahab al-Bijli. He passed between 149 to 224. But since his verdicts were not recognized, we can skip him. So you have Yahya bin Sa'id, then Abdurrahman bin Mahdi. Thereafter, Yahya bin Ma'in. Since Yahya bin Ma'in was in the same circle with Ali bin Madini and Imam Ahmad, it is very surprising that Ibn Hajar rahmallah did not mention his name here. He took the name of Ali bin Madini and Imam and Ahmad bin Hanbal. But you know that Yahya bin Ma'in and Imam Ahmad were very close pals. They were good friends of each other. There's a lot of love between them. Who was it? Was it Abbas bin Dawri who said, he said that قلما سمعت أحمد بن حنبل يسمي يحيى بن معين باسمه إنما كان يقول له أبو زكريا. Like this here, they had a very strong and close relationship. In fact, he even said, Imam Ahmad rahimahullah said with regards to Yahya bin Ma'in that ها هنا رجل خلقه الله لهذا الشأن. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created Yahya bin Ma'in just for this year. Allah, and obviously, since Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created him for this, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala made him competent enough. So this was the one friend, Yahya bin Ma'in. And then the other friend was Ali bin Madini. He came onto the scene, and it was him that Imam Ahmad rahimahullah confessed and said, أعلمنا بالعلل علي ibn al-Madini, the one who knows the most ilal. So from these three colleagues, they say that Imam Ahmad was more knowledgeable in the fiqh of hadith. Yahya bin Ma'in was more knowledgeable in jarh wa ta'dil, and Ali bin Madini was more he was more knowledgeable in ilal. You can see, so he says that this is in al-majruhin عالمنا بالعلل علي ibn al-Madini. Likewise, Alama Bulqini said with regards to the book which he wrote that أجل كتاب في العلل كتاب الحافظ ibn al-Madini. Obviously, if he was the most knowledgeable, it makes sense that his book was the greatest book which was written in the Khatib al-Baghdadi said كان علي ibn al-Madini فيلسفو هذه الصنعة وطبيبها ولسان طائفة الحديث وخطيبها. So obviously, suffice to say that Imam Bukhari rahmallah would look up to him. So here in Al-Yawaqit wa Durar فَأَلَّفَ فِيهِ تَأْلِيفًا حَافِلًا. He wrote a very, very important book in ilal. But then with regards to Imam Ahmad rahimahullah, lots of his rulings are scattered. So you will find that his rulings are in the ilal of his son Abdullah. Likewise, you have the ilal of Marudi, so not Marwadi. Remember that this here is ilal of Marudi. Likewise, ilal wa ma'arifatul rijal of Maymuni. Alama Khalal, he also gathered many verdicts of Imam Ahmad rahimahullah in Jami' al-Masail Imam Ahmad. And a portion of this kitab here is printed with the name Al-Muntakhab min al-Ilal lil-Khalal. It was written by Ibn Qudama and it is printed. Tariq bin Iwadullah done tahqiq of it. And then also you remember all the various suwalat you have. So you have Imam Abu Dawud rahmallah, all the questions which he asked Imam Ahmad, so suwalat Abu Dawud Ahmad. Likewise Athram, his suwalat. So in the response there, you find lots of verdicts on the ilal. So these three scholars, they were so close to each other, and each one of them contributed. So now you can see that the science now, in the beginning of the 3rd century, is starting to gain prominence. Now you have three in one time who are outlining all these hidden defects, and also so many they are outlining. And it makes sense, like we said, because the asanid became longer. And remember that it was a time which was brimming with muhaddithun. You know that this year is now the time of the authors of Sihah Sitta. Some of the classes would see hundreds of thousands of students in attendance. Then he mentions with regards to Abu Hatim. So he was born in the year 195 Hijri, and he passed away in 277. And thereafter, Yaqub ibn Shayba. So he wrote Musnad Yaqub ibn Shayba. Most of it is mafqud. In fact, he commenced writing himself and he did not complete it. So firstly, the book is incomplete. And then from that incomplete portion, there's only a portion which we know of. Most of the kitab is mafqud. So few pages were found, and that's how it is printed in a small booklet. Then coming to Imam Bukhari, most of his verdicts are spread across all the various books. You can even deduce some laws from his Sahih. But his greatest book is Tarikh al-Kabir. In this book, he gathered a lot of ilal. He also jarah and ta'dil. If you want to know ansab of the narrators, you want to know basic history, etc. So he comments on about 2,000 odd narrators and about 4,000 narrations in this kitab. And then even in Ilal al-Kabir of Imam Tirmidhi, you know Imam Tirmidhi everywhere, Saltu Muhammad ibn Ismail, I asked Imam Bukhari, and Imam Bukhari would respond and he would inform us about the Ilal. So Ibn Hajar here then didn't take the name of Imam Muslim rahmullah. You know Imam Muslim era 202 or 204 or 206. The more correct is 206, but there's these different views. And he passed away in 261. So from his Sahih, again you can deduce so much. But his Kitab al-Tamyiz, is really valuable. This is the very first kitab which Shaykh Taha Karan rahmullah gave as a gift to me. After that, other gifts as well, but it was the very first. Thereafter, now Ibn Hajar takes the names of two cousins, Abu Hatim and Abu Zur'a. So Abu Hatim, 195, he was born. And after that, then so that statement which you quoted earlier of Alama Bulqini, Ajallu Kitabin, Ullifa fil Ilal Kitab ibn al-Madini. So thereafter he says, Summa ibn Abi Hatim wal Khilal wa ajma'uha Kitab ad-Darqutni. So now he's talking about the last name here. Was, and in between you have many other scholars. You had Imam Nasa'i who came, Imam Tirmidhi rahmallah, Ibn Khuzaymah, Alama Uqayli, Ibn Hibban, Ibn Adi in his Kamil. There's so many. Because like this, when you go through the books of Majruhin and you go through the books of Du'afa, and you find lots of verdicts on Ilal. But Ibn Hajar skips all those names and he comes to the master of this field, and that was Imam Darqutni. So Imam Darqutni, rahmallah, he was really gifted in this field. His book is like the greatest encyclopedia. It is printed with the name Ilal Darqutni, Awil Ilal al-Warida fil Ḥadīth an-Nabawiyah. That's how the full name is written. So the Awil is like in the title. It's printed by Dar al-Kutub al-Ilmiyah, if I remember correctly, I think 11 volumes. And even then it is incomplete. It is only like about 55-60% of the book, because if it had to be published in full, it would have been close to about 20 volumes. And he based this kitab here on the names of Sahaba, etc. But the most amazing thing of this kitab, you can remember here, Ibn Hajar is saying, وَهُوَ مِنْ أَغْمَضِ أَنْوَاعِ الْعُلُومِ وَأَدَقِّهَا. That it is the most difficult of all sciences. Yet Imam Darqutni, when he would, this entire kitab is dictated from his memory. So you can imagine such a difficult topic, and he is dictating it from a memory. In Sirah Alam al-Nubala, al-Madhabi rahmallah says, Qala Abu Bakr al-Barqani, kana Darqutni yumli ala ilal min hifzihi. He would mention all these ilal from his hifz. So based on that, Imam Darqutni rahmallah, Imam al-Madhabi rahmallah said, إن كان كتاب العلل الموجود قد أملاه الدارقطني من حفظه كما دلت عليه هذه الحكاية فهذا أمر عظيم يقضي به للدارقطني أنه أحفظ أهل الدنيا. You see, it is saying that if he means that the entire kitab, which we know, it's the same in Imam Zahabi's time, if this entire kitab was, he said it from memory, then we will have to then conclude that most definitely he is ahfadu ahli dunya, the most knowledgeable person who this world has ever seen. Because remember, one is that he it's from memory, but there was no chance for him to prepare. You can't say that he made mutala'a, maybe he went through it and then he came and now he's saying it from memory. It was just questions which were asked on the spur of the moment. And there he was giving impromptu answers. He didn't even have time to think about it or to prepare. The same Abu Bakr al-Barqani, he says, "Ana alladhi kuntu as'alu." I used to ask him questions and these are the answers. And that's how the kitab was written. So he gave such responses, if you have to go through his kitab, such responses that even if a person had resources and he had to research and study, see, maybe you asked a person on a Monday and for 1 week he prepared, he went through kitabs and he came and he now gave you that answer. Then to it would be a great accomplishment. We would have said, wow, you would marvel at his research. But imagine here, from memory, he is answering all of this. And this is also a proof to show us that even though we have computers, you can maybe put something in Maktabat al-Shamila on Google. These scholars, their minds were even greater than all of these computers. And that's actually a reality, because in his ilal, you will find such narrations which you don't find in any other book. So that means he knew what the computer doesn't know, to put it in that sense, because even if you have to go put it, it's in no other book. So how are you going to research it? Go put it on Google, it's not going to be found. But he knew about it. So you can see that there are so many asanid which he mentioned. We don't even know about, we don't even have those asanid in any of the other books. So this here shows us on another point, now talking about how great Imam Darqutni rahmallah was. He said that if a person wants to know, so such a great Imam, not just anyone, such a great Imam, Imam Darqutni, who Al-Madhabi is saying that if he had to dictate this from his memory, then it means it is ahfadu ahli dunya, that it means that he is the most knowledgeable. He say that if you want to see how qusuru ilmi, if I want to see how ignorant I am, then I go look through the mustakhraj of Allama Ismaili. And you know the mustakhraj of Allama Ismaili, it's based on the kitab on Sahih al-Bukhari. So that shows you that Allama Abu Bakr Ismaili was more knowledgeable than Imam Darqutni, and Imam Bukhari was more knowledgeable than Abu Bakr Ismaili. And what Imam Bukhari said, that I didn't feel myself inferior in front of any teacher like how I felt myself inferior in front of Ali bin Madini. So you can imagine the knowledge of Ali bin Madini in this field. And then another book in Ilal, the name here which is not mentioned, is Musnad of Bazar. As you know, that a portion of it is published with the name Al-Bahr al-Zakhar. And here the Saudi attaché of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in South Africa, they gave it out for free. And that is how I got a copy. So anyway, and then like I said, you find many verdicts of Ilal in all these other books. But then 2 centuries later, so Allama Ibn al-Jawzi, who was born in the year 510 and passed away in 597, he said that فَإِنْ قَوَى نَظْرُكْ وَرُسُقَتْ فِي هَذَا الْعِلْمِ, and if you feel فَهِمْتَ مِثْلَ هَذَا, then you can maybe understand. وَإِنْ ضَعُفْتَ فَسَلْ عَنْهُ, if you are weak, then ask. But then he says, وَإِنْ كَانَ قَدْ قَلَّ مَنْ يَفْهَمُ هَذَا بَلْ قَدْ عُدِمَ. So in his time, like you say, he passed away in the year 597. By then it was already. So basically this was a science which was between the 3rd century to the 5th century, but it reached its height in the 3rd century. And the earlier scholars, they didn't have to worry about it. All these things you have to take into note, the earlier scholars and the later scholars. If Imam Ahmad rahmallah says he knew hundreds of thousands of Ḥadīth, you don't have to feel feel inferior that Imam Abu Hanifa didn't narrate hundreds of thousands of Ḥadīth, because Imam Abu Hanifa came in a different era. In that time, when Imam Ahmad said hundreds of thousands, he was referring to the different asanid. In Imam Abu Hanifa was, you can compare him with Imam Zuhri, who only narrated 2,000 Ḥadīth. So there's no need now to come up and say. So that is why it's very important to place all of these people, all of these scholars in history, and find exactly, so that you don't exaggerate. There's a kitab which is written, and one of our asatiz Ustad also made tahqiq of it. In there, they try to prove that Imam Abu Hanifa also knew hundreds of thousands of hadiths, but it's impossible. It's definitely an exaggeration. You compare him with the people of his era. You don't compare him with someone who came so much later. So like that, it doesn't mean any of the earlier scholars needed to know so much of ilal. As you can see, it's a subject for the later scholars. Now, in concluding this, he says, وَقَدْ تَقْصُرُ عِبَارَةُ الْمُعَلِّلِ عَنْ إِقَامَةِ الْحُجَّةِ عَلَى دَعْوَاهُ, that sometimes the person will have difficulty in expressing and in unveiling why is he regarding there to be a defect in this narration. He says, كَالسَّيْرَفِي فِي نَقْدِ الدِّنَارِ وَالدِّرْهَمِ, just like a sayrafi. So in today's time, translated as a jeweler. In their time, a person who used to deal in those coins, he would have difficulty in explaining to you. So if you take tungsten and go to a jeweler, he will tell you it's not real gold. This is tungsten. Or take a moissanite and go, and they'll tell you it's not a diamond. But tell them to give you dalil. How they're going to give you dalil? So this doesn't mean that they had a weakness of the Arabic language, or they will the lack of proficiency. It's like, sometimes even for us, when we have feelings and emotions in our day-to-day lives, we say, I cannot express to you how happy I feel today. I can't tell you how tired I am today. So these are like, just mundane, simple examples. But in every science this year happens. So an expert, if he sometimes he has difficulty in expressing to you. And this year, that statement which I quoted from Abdurrahman bin Mahdi in the last lesson, فَلَوْ قُلْتَ لِلْعَالِمِ يُعَلِّلُ الْحَدِيثِ مِنْ أَيْنَ قُلْتَ هَذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ لَهُ حُجَّةٌ. He won't be able to give you any hujjah. But you need to spend time like them, and if you study what they studied. And that's a famous incident of Imam Hakim when someone came to him and said, Mal hujjah fi ta'lilikum al-Ḥadīth. What's the hujjah that you are making? They said, Al-hujjah an tas'alani an hadithin lahu illa fa'adhkuru illatahu thumma taqsir ibn awara وتسأله عنه ولا تخبره بأنك قد سألتني عنه فيذكر علته ثم تقصر أبا حاتم فيعلله. Like this here, he's saying when you go to all these different scholars, they will come to the same conclusion, because it's just like how we have studied. So if you study like how they studied, then you will know. But like we explained, that in spite of all of that, when you go to the books of ilal, you will find that they give reasons. So in whichever way, ultimately they did give reasons, although it was so difficult for them to mention it, but they did give reasons. The quick point with which I have to go for Asr Salah, but very quickly, Mullah al-Qari says, وَعَلَمْ أَنَّ بَعْضَهُمْ يُطْلِقُ الْعِلَّةَ عَلَى غَيْرِ الْمَعْنَى الْمَذْكُورِ كَكَذِبِ الرَّاوِي وَفِسْقِ وَغَفْلَةِ وَسُوءِ حِفْظِهِ. So that shows you, just like how we said matruk can be used for all the above categories, likewise at times they would use the word ilal. So in the beginning of the lesson we explained how ilal is khafiyya. Now you can see that when you open the books of ilal, you will also find examples where it is zahir, like where there's a kadhab or fasiq or a person who has a weak memory. And likewise, Ibn Hajar in his Nukat, لأن ضعف في الراوي علة في الخبر والانقطاع في الإسناد علة الخبر وعنة المدلس علة في الخبر وجهالة حال الراوي علة في الخبر. So all of these here are different. And now you can see, because this illah is so hidden, sometimes maybe there would have been difference of opinion. So some scholars would feel that it is a mu'allal narration, and others would feel that it's not a mu'allal narration. Like for example, you have a gharib narration, one person narrating it. Some would feel that this person is competent enough. Others would feel that no, he's not competent enough. He can't narrate a hadith on his own. And that is the stuff. The benefit of learning ilal in today's times is like this year is these books. Not many. The average alim won't even go to these books. So to know the status of a particular narrator or particular narration, you can get it from these books. Also, in order, if you start from now, inshallah, one day when you teach Sunan Abi Dawud and Sunan at-Tirmidhi, you have to know ilal of hadith, because you know that many of the Hanafi proofs, they bring all these hidden defects. Outwardly it appears as strong, and then they bring the hidden defects, and that's when you will actually see how competent the scholars, the ulama of Hanafis were also in ilal al-hadith, and to combat yourself against Salafism and those who attack you need to learn ilal al-hadith. Inshallah, we'll continue on Saturday. Until then, jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.